Hey, welcome to the show, Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby along with Jeff Gerard. We're talking about your family's finances, of course, getting out of debt, managing your money, planning for retirement, living in retirement, staying retired. So a lot of us, forget that when you retire, it's not just a moment in time. It's a lifestyle. It's a change. It's a way of looking, spending money, making money. And fortunately for some, it's a whole new life. It's a whole new way of living.
It is, and I think it's just really an extension of who you call yourself and what your life was about prior to getting up every day and trading your time for work. And I think we've talked about this a lot, where people identify themselves and who they are with their career and what choices they've made to make money throughout their lifetime. And then when that stops, that's kind of an abrupt part of life for a lot of people. So I encourage folks, when they're talking about retirement, is to not look at it as a box that they check or a finish line that they cross necessarily, although it is that way in some cases, but to plan through retirement and not make it this abrupt wall that they have to try to climb.
Yeah, it's a process of actually easing into a new lifestyle, very similar to having teenagers, right? When your kids are younger, you make the play dates, you're with them, and then eventually they go off to school, but they're only gone for a half day because it's preschool or kindergarten, and then they come home, and then after a while they transition to all-day school, and then they come home, and you're with them on the weekends and holidays, and then they go off to college, and it's not weekends anymore, but occasionally they come home for the holidays.
Sure.
And then they get married or they move out, and now you see them once or twice a week or once or twice a month, right? So it's an easing into that empty nest syndrome thing as your life begins to change. And you have time. It's a gradual process. You have time. It's a process in life. Retirement is the same thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people play retired, right? Financially speaking, they say, okay, my retirement income is going to be X. When it is, I want to be able to see if I could live that way. So let's say it's $2,000 a month less than what they're currently earning. So what they do is they'll go off in life and they'll play as if that extra $2,000 isn't coming in.
That's right.
Now, sometimes you don't need that extra money because the bill that it was paying is paid off. So you know that the doors, the $2,000 is coming in the front door and it's going out the back door to pay your car payment or your house payment but once those are paid off, it doesn't matter if it comes in the front door because it's not going out the back. You follow me on that? So keep in mind that the process of retirement is about how much money you get to keep in your pocket, and believe it or not, how much you're spending. And you might think, oh, of course I understood that, but no. There's a way to do things in a bargain process. There's a way to do things where you're spending less money on a day-to-day basis than the guy sitting next to you at the restaurant or the movie theater or the cruise line or the hotel or the airline, right? All of those things, you don't have to pay the same as everybody else. There's discounts out there.
Sure. And I think we have to remember that in retirement, what are we going to have more of than anything?
Usually time.
Time, that's right.
And people will say, oh, if you don't understand, I'm busier now than ever. Busier, but are you more productive? Because the idea is to be productive. And I'm happier if you are. But if you think busy is, I'm cleaning up the mess here and I'm making a mess, then I get to clean it up. That's not often a level of productivity that leads you to self-fulfilling, self-worth, a valued lifestyle, and eventually you get to that place 8 or 10 years, maybe less, after retirement, where you just say, I'm bored, but meanwhile I can't go back to my career field because it's already changed, technology speaking.
Right.
All my friends that were the managers or the supervisors or the owners of those companies, they've moved on, and I'm just not valuable to anybody anymore. So you have to plan for those things so that the productivity, whatever that is valuable, not just in the busy factor, like, everybody's got something they're doing, whether it's watching TV or whether it's driving your car in traffic. You're busy. Mm-hmm. Everybody's busy. We're America.
And how do people usually fill that gap? Is they spend money. And so that first part of the first decade of your retirement is when you can plan on spending the most amount of money. And we've talked about that at length. And that's kind of a dangerous place to be if you don't have those things that are productive in your life to continue on a lifestyle that's fulfilling to you. Because we've seen it time and again where people have this amount of money and then it dwindles down in the first decade and then they realize they don't have enough money to live in retirement for the next 25, 30 years.
Yeah, and let's recap those 10-year time frames that you're talking about. There's usually 3 10-year time frames in retirement. The first 10 years, that's when you spend the most money. You're traveling, you're buying the RV, you're the vacation home, you're spending time with children or grandchildren, usually just children at that time, or maybe a couple of grandchildren. But life is generally busy. You're out there, you're moving, especially if you retire at a younger age. And as time moves on, your goal, the second 10 years, you stay closer to home. You're now kind of babysitting. You're now the one who's taking care of the children's grandchildren's children, right? You're now the one that's out there taking the kids on cruises, right? I was on a vacation recently, and I saw a lot of grandparents with their grandchildren on a trip. And they were doing that specifically because the kids were out of school, the grandparents have extra cash,
Nice.
Kids are 12, 14, 16, they want to take them on a trip and spend time with just that child or maybe 2. And so it gives a time when you're going to be doing that in the second 10 years. The third 10 years pretty much is all about medical. You're going to stay close to home, usually just a few miles away from the house, church, doctor's appointments. Your life revolves around your doctor's appointments. Let me see, I can meet Wednesday. Oh no, not at lunch because I have a doctor's appointment. Everything is about doctor's appointments. And if you take care of your parents or yourself, you know that. So the third 10 years of our life in retirement is usually about doctors, medications, assisted living, doing things where we're spending money, but in an area that is really built more towards health and medical care.
And if you look at retirement in that way and you break it up into those 3 parts at the minimum, it doesn't seem as daunting as, I have 30 years of doing this, whatever I'm doing. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to retirees or people about to retire, and they say, I have to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because they don't have something to fill their time with. But if you break it up into those areas, I think it's a bit more something you can take on a little bit easier than a big lump sum.
We've done that over and over again where we've sat down and said, we have built a lifestyle, all of us, and that lifestyle that we've built is something we want to branch into retirement, but we're going to do that in a different way. You might say, hey, I was used to spending time and socializing with my friends at work. Well, they're really kind of not your friends. Unless you associate with them outside of work, they're really not your friends. They're your coworkers, they're your acquaintances, but when you're not there every day, they're not your coworkers every day, they're not seeing you every day, you become less important to them. I don't mean you are less important, but you're just less important to them. And you need to know that, because in that world, in that conversation, your value has to be found somewhere else. And that's a very scary thing to feel like, when yesterday you were very important to a group of people and tomorrow, they barely remember your name.
It's kind of sad, but it just, again, goes back to my point earlier of investing too much in your work life and making that your identity.
And think about that for a second. How many times have other people that have come before you retired, and how often are you hanging out with them?
Great point.
You may have gone to lunches once a week or once every couple of weeks when they were there. You may have talked to them in the hallway or at the water cooler or before work, but now they're not there anymore. Are you reaching out to them? Probably not. And it's not because you're bad or they're bad. It's just your interests are different. Time in your life is different, right? Look at the friends you have today versus the friends you had last month, last year. I went to a wedding recently. I guess it's been over a year, but and it was amazing to me because they said that the wedding list, the list of people to attend, was to be ones that would help celebrate their future, not their past. In other words,
Wow.
They didn't want the cousin they had never seen for 10 years or barely saw for 10 years. They didn't care about that. What they cared about were the people that were going to be in their life moving forward.
That's profound.
It was pretty cool. They were younger people, to me, younger than me, but they were still in their 20s, late 20s, and they were professionals and they were successful. And they said, we have found that the people that we surround ourselves now and expect to surround ourselves with in the future are the ones that we want to have at our wedding. And I thought, wow, except, my dad was my best man in my wedding, but except for my dad, the other 2 groomsmen in our wedding, we don't see.
Yeah.
And in my wife's maid of honors, I think she didn't see either of them either. You know, the what do they call those things? Bridesmaids?
Mm-hmm.
Or those things.
And I
Those
can
ladies.
count on, one hand for each, my wife and I, of the people that are still in our lives from that same scenario.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people tell that same story.
So keep in mind, guys, that the future of retirement is about the
Yeah.
surrounding of the people. The financial stuff, 1 + 1 is 2. We'll get to those details, but just remember that there still is a financial component, of course, but that emotional and that relationship component in retirement is something that isn't thought of. Depression is great at that group, at that age group. It's actually a significant thing. The feeling of I could have done more with my life. It's halfway over. I've got less time in front of me than I do behind me. Those kinds of thoughts are things that can really eat up a big part of your life. So we're going to continue in just a minute. When we do, we're going to get into the countdown to retirement. We have a year left to go for your retirement. What do you do last year or 2 or 3 before you step into that ring? And before you get to the place that says, and now I'm retired, what are some of those pre-planned things that you can do that can at least ensure not just the emotional, but the financial side of it? We have that and a whole lot more when we come back on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby along with Jeff Gerard on AM 1220 KHTS.